you know well that the political dialogue is a big problem in Macedonia. You were deeply involved in the March agreement. You have a good experience talking with the Macedonian politicians. What do you think, having in mind your experience, what's the problem that Macedonia is not able to establish a proper political dialogue?
Amongst the two main political parties on the Macedonian community, it's extremely polarised and personal.
Why so? Why so? I mean, what's your personal impression? I mean, yeah.
I'm a politician. It's not unusual in countries that political parties don't like each other, and sometimes
it's obvious. I mean,
sometimes there are bad
in all democracy
relations.
parties are not in love. That's for sure. But I mean, can you explain this animosity between the two parties, which is obvious?
I think it's partly personal, right? And as I say, it's not. We've both agreed it's not unusual in democracies that can be the case. But my appeal in March, my appeal this week in the light of the European Council, is whatever our political disagreements in the country, whatever personal animosities there are, there's a bigger picture out there, and the bigger picture is that this is a country that is suffering still deep poverty and economic being held back economically by the world recession, struggling to get the investment that is needed. It's a country where there is peace and stability of a type that isn't enjoyed everywhere around, but where we understand that the relations between the different ethnic communities are fragile. It's a country where democracy is only being embedded. It is not yet really solid. Where, whether it's the press or civil society, having a genuinely independent, pluralistic, confident, non-politicised, non-party politicised press and civil society is a real challenge, not just in the country, but in all of the countries of the Western Balkans. So that, it is not surprising that many of these things are true, and therefore the relations between the parties and the polarisation we've seen are a product of that. But I'm part of trying to change it.
Several times the Parliament and the Commission both asked Macedonia to make progress in the field of the freedom of the media. The situation looks like being worse today. Journalists, that car incident of the journalists raised many suspicions in the public opinion. Institutions don't care to explain more about what's happened. Another journalist today is in custody, no further explanation. So many things are happening right now and make the situation being worse than, let's say, 1 year ago. What's the problem with the freedom of the media?
Well, firstly, many of my friends and interlocutors in the country won't like me saying it, but it is worse. I agree with the premise of the question. I don't like having to do that, but it is my judgment, and I put that in the European Parliament resolution, and that is how the European Parliament voted. Now, we can talk about the closure of certain TV channels and so on, and each of those could be discussed on its merits. But the overall picture is one that is deeply worrying. I felt that former Deputy Prime Minister Arifi, with the roundtable she established with the journalists, with the progress on defamation, had begun to make progress. And I think the OSCE expert on freedom of the media acknowledged that. What we have now is a new media bill that's being promulgated by the government. I hear very different accounts and assessments of that bill, including some deep fears about it, including in relation to extending regulatory arrangements which were primarily intended in the country and in other countries, the broadcast media, to the press and to the social media, that are well outside meeting the European directive on audiovisual media. So there are proper concerns and questions to be put there. But as I've been assured, there is a public consultation about that. It's now in its second round. And I want the Journalists Association, everyone who is cherishing freedom of expression in the country, to make sure that you do submit your comments in that consultation, that you put your view, make sure people like me and the European Commission hear it. But then the promise to all those who are critics of the new law that want to see progress on freedom of expression is that when the European Commission judges the progress or otherwise on freedom of the media, when I judge and put to the European Parliament to the vote the political assessment of that, our test will be how far the law reflects the European acquis or not. And that is a pretty clear statement for everyone who's following this issue, and I hope it's a helpful one to all who cherish freedom of expression in the country.
Despite your efforts to make situation better, as you said, the situation is worse. What's the problem with the so-called soft power of the European Union to implement the core value of European values such as freedom of the media? Is there any problem with the European so-called soft power to help and to implement the European values? In the case of Macedonia, of course, I'm asking you.
Well, this interview is being watched by Ambassador Araf and my colleagues in the European Commission delegation, EU delegation in Skopje, along with everyone else in the country. And I don't want to do an injustice to the power of the efforts we are putting in. We're putting in considerable amounts of money, technical assistance, promoting projects on issues like freedom of the media.
I said clearly you made a huge effort.
Yeah, but that's not just the effort of politicians, which I acknowledge and thank you for what you said. But I'm talking about the follow-up efforts of the experts, of the civil servants, of the Commission and EU staff, in partnership with civil society, with political actors and others in the country. And I don't want to denigrate, I'm sure you wouldn't either, the real efforts that there are. So, it's very easy for us to sit here in the European Parliament in Brussels and to say Europe either succeeds or Europe fails. The country either succeeds or the country fails. The enlargement is a journey. It's been a journey that took well over 10 years for the country of Eastern Europe. My own, as I've often said in Skopje and elsewhere in the country, my own country, Great Britain, was turned down for membership. France vetoed our membership. They had a referendum. They were against us, right? But we overcame the battles, and here we are, absolutely sitting at the table and part of everything. And that can still be the future. It will and can be the future for the country. And 80% of people in the country support membership of the European Union. It's the highest of any country. We will succeed.
Yeah. Are you worried about the future of the country?
Of course.
Why?
Because of the word I used earlier, fragility. That I understand that there are people in political parties in the different ethnic communities who completely share the vision that I've been putting to you today and I put every day in this European Parliament for the country. But I know there are others who don't. And I know that the level of consensus between the different actors in the country to achieve it is very fragile. And I don't want things to go backwards, but I know they might. And that's why, at this crucial, sensitive moment, I've asked for that patience and understanding. There will be many people, and many within good people and fair people, there'll be a temptation to react in a negative way to what's going on in Luxembourg and in Brussels this week. It would be the wrong reaction, though, for the future.
It's obvious that the name issue is one of the biggest obstacles for Macedonia. There was a proposal from the mediator, Nimitz. Do you have an idea what's happened with this proposal? I mean, till now, no one of neither Macedonia nor Greece haven't reacted on this proposal.
Well, no successful negotiation takes place in public, and I've said on many occasions that the solution, when it comes, as it must come, will come when perhaps it's least expected. All I can say is when I was in one of my recent meetings with Mr. Gruevski, he said to me, do a deal, if I do a deal on the name issue, everything will be different. And he's right. He is right to say that. And I, of course, encouraged him to do everything within his power to do that deal. Yeah. I was talking with Stefan Füle, the European Commissioner, again, literally last week on this, and he and I share the view that everything is still possible. We can't predict, and I don't predict that it's going to happen today, tomorrow. That is outside our control. But are serious talks and efforts taking place with the support, seriously, not just of the UN, but from us within the EU, that have some, we hope, more than some prospect of success.
You hope that the solution could come soon?
I absolutely do. It must, right? And I'm not saying that out of a
Are they political
naivety.
will on the both sides, do you think?
The promise I've always given in the country is that I put the same pressure on in Athens as I do in Skopje, that I talk robustly to Greek and to Bulgarian colleagues here. I represent their views too, I don't hide that, you know, which is why we come to a consensus in the European Parliament. I hope, by the way, showing that, you know, even where there is disagreement, it's possible in a parliament, in a parliamentary democracy, to come to agreement, to consensus. But the pressure that I put on in order to achieve a successful outcome on the name issue is equal on both sides. It's a promise I've made and it's a promise I keep.
Is there a political will on the both sides, you think? Greece and Macedonia?
That political will only be demonstrated when agreement is struck, and so forgive me if I reserve my judgment on that. But I am not a commentator, I'm not a critic sitting on the sidelines. I'm an actor myself trying to make things happen. So I'm not going to sit back and criticise either of the parties for lack of political will either. I'm part of the business of encouraging them to show it, and I will continue to be so.
Това беше Ричард Ховит, известувач во Европскиот парламент за Македонија. Ви благодарам за вниманието. Се гледаме во наредното издание на Еврозум.